want to speak just a moment about the actual version that we are going to see, or that we can let you know it's not exact, you're not watching exactly what you would have seen on New Year's Eve in 1984.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much.
I think it's all good. Yeah, thank you so much, Robyn, for the introduction. Thank you, Alina and the team for having us, and thank you all for being here. It's great to get together at this historical moment that we're actually also in right now. It's on Pompidou, where it will be in a few days because for at least 5 years. So through this performance and this satellite performance that we'll share with you tonight, we'll perhaps also share this vision of how the museum space can be invested differently, going from a space of social choreography to also the virtual realm. So what you will see is that there will be many images from the Son Pompidou itself in 1984, but also superposed with electronic imagery, with pre-film footage. So it really does create something that becomes, I think, greater than the sum of its parts.
Thank you. I should also mention that we want to thank Electronic Arts Intermix, who facilitated this version for us to see along with the Paik Foundation. So I wanted to also thank them. And so right, this is a much shorter version. It's around 38 minutes, and then we will gather again to talk more about it. But this is a specific edited version so that you're able to see both elements of the New York and Paris performances at the same time. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and again, thank you, OFFSCREEN, for supporting this program and for our research leading up to it and moving forward. So I think you can see now that how this edited version was at one point 2 different broadcasts. And one thing I wanted to, give a few minutes about is the background of the kitchen, which is in New York, which is where I work. I don't want to assume that the audience is familiar, but the kitchen was started as an artist collective by the folks you see here, and primarily by Woody and Steiner in 1971. We were founded as an artist collective in the kitchen of the Mercer Art Center, and we've had 4 different locations since then. And the initial idea was to have a space where video and music could be shown, presented, experimented with. And so initially we were with the Kitchen Center for Music and Video. And the name sort of changed over the years, and we took on other disciplines such as poetry and performance and the visual arts. And so now we are known as sort of the Music Center for Avant-Garde Art. We first engaged with the kitchen in the early 1970s, in 1974, so shortly after we became our own 501c3 organization, nonprofit organization, and performed with Charlotte Mormon, with many other artists such as John Cage over the years. And this is one image of what the kitchen looked like in 1972. So as you can see, it was sort of, bring your own equipment, bring your own projector, your own television, show your video, your Portapack, and the same was the case for music. And so Paik was very much part of this scene. And in leading up to the broadcast on New Year's Day, the artist approached the kitchen and wanted to not only was Good Morning, Mr. Orwell shown at the kitchen on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1984, but for the following, I'm going to kind of go around here with our images. For the following month of January, he organized a set of live programs, lectures, and talks that essentially were a continuation, a way for him to quite clearly process live what he had gone through to produce this, major moment in both kind of art, music, and performance history. And so when I was part of this curatorial residency at OFFSCREEN last year, and we were all prompted to sort of submit an idea for an exhibition or a program or a research project that we wouldn't be able to do out, some support, and kind of if no other parameters were in our way, such as institutional bureaucracies, budgets, travel, all the things that we all have to sort out as we work towards our vision. And so I proposed this idea to revisit this moment in 1984, where in New York, the kitchen was really host to this moment of Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, that of course took place at the Center at the Pompidou. And also in this moment in time, 2024, 2025, both the kitchen and Pompidou are without our homes, our buildings. The kitchen's inside of a multi-year renovation, our building in Chelsea. We are not currently in. We are in satellite space in the West Village. You'll be closing very soon. So what does it mean to be an institution without walls? And how can two institutions come together at a time when we actually don't have our own space, but still retain our community? Maybe we can expand our communities, and maybe we can revisit our joint histories with Good Morning, Mr. Orwell. So this was the very abstract, broad stroke proposal that I gave to OFFSCREEN, and they were excited by the idea of what if the kitchen and the Pompidou could come together to think about what it means to have this kind of expanded idea of global disco, as Sandra Paik would say. But what could we do? How could we do it? How could we look at the artists of today using the technology today to have maybe another moment of simultaneous creativity? So with that, I contacted many colleagues at the Pompidou and with this idea, and we are really just the beginning stages of this research. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're using these slides to sort of, explore the touchstones of our shared histories with performance, music, video, broadcast, so that we can give you a better sense of what our hope and ambition is, which is in a few years' time, maybe less, we might be able to not restage exactly Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, but to stage performances both in Paris and New York that would then be streamed internationally with using the technologies and the creative, cultural makers of today. So that's sort of the idea for what would happen in the future. But to go back to the past, I gave you a little intro to the kitchen, and now I'm going to hand you you have the mic, but I'm going to give you a chance to talk about the history of the Pompidou with performance, with video, with music, and also how Musée is at the center of this also.
Right. Yeah. So what was really interesting when Robyn contacted me was to reflect on this shared heritage, of course with differences, but also with many convergences. So this Pompidou opens 4 years after the kitchen in 1977, and really what you can see is the way that performance, technology, media really interact as the central tools of creating meaning in their institution, in a new institutional framework, which of course takes on a new scale that had ever been done before. So right now we're exploring these questions particularly because we actually realized that we didn't know our own performance history so well. So it was an initiative that was taken with the Professor Antoine Delec within the Laboratoire d'Histoire Permanente, the Laboratory for Permanent History at Pompidou, which has been aiming over the last couple of years to do a kind of archaeology of these performances, this mostly written performance history of the Saint Pompidou, and of course with its many resonances and charismatic connections both within the institution and abroad. So, for instance, we can see that what was really one of the central points of the Saint Pompidou was this forum space, which is really at the heart of the institution, and which is this huge space that visitors encounter the moment they go to the Saint Pompidou. So, in terms of performance, the Saint Pompidou didn't aim to be another theater among the existing scenes in Paris, but really to imagine the forum space as a kind of apparatus where technology and human bodies would mingle to favor new expressions. So it was really like a very conscious and effort made in terms of these initiatives, which is also, of course, for the cinemas as well. My colleague Jonathan Potti has been working on inaugural cinema, which was an initiative by Peter Kobelkas, which was really present in several of the disciplines, also on Pompidou at the time. And maybe if you passed before we saw Robert Ashley's opera Atlanta, but also, of course, one very impactful event was the forum events by Merce Cunningham, in which he not only deployed a full-scale dance experience, as he called it in the forum, together with composers, John Cage, for instance, that we saw earlier in Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, but he also imagined these audiovisual apparatuses for showing dance in a more virtual setting as a means to captivate the ephemeral quality of dance, and even imagining, which I think is very interesting because it really resounds with what we saw in Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, of imagining the projection of a dance film as a media in itself, and as a setting, and as a almost scenography of its own. So this was really the kind of framework in which Namjoon Paik's satellite performance took place, and he had even been present in some Pompidou a few years earlier. Yeah, like with his Jardin video, which occupied the whole forum space, just like Merce Cunningham 1 year later.
And I'll just quickly respond to this scan in particular, because this is a page from the magazine. Yes?
Yep. Exactly.
Right. But you see that actually Namjoon Paik had scrawled over the magazine and drew these, I don't know, televisions that are marked by New York and Paris, and meeting at the top, which is a drawing of Saturn with the number 84 at the top. And in going through files in the Kitchens archive, we actually see these sorts of little television figures in various notes. This is actually from your archive. These are storyboards, sketches leading up to Good Morning, Mr. Orwell. And I thought would be kind of nice for everyone to see, to have a sense of how they were planning, frame by frame, the two different broadcasts. So again, the 1984 and 1984 was its own program, envisioned by Namjoon to be held in the kitchen for the whole month of January 1984. This is the press release on the left, and all of the artists that were involved are included here. The overall description of what Good Morning, Mr. Orwell was, and listings of various programs that would take place. And then this was the postcard that was made on the occasion of the program. And this last image here in our archive, so the Kitchen's 20th Century Archives are actually digitized and available to view through the Getty. So you can actually just Google the Getty Kitchen Archives, and it'll bring you to a search engine where you can see what is already digitized from our 20th Century Archive. And I would say that our archive is really, it's a touchstone for all of our programming. We see our archive as a living driver, collaborator within our program. It's not sort of this like shelved, dusty set of files. We are known to engage artists over multiple points of their career. So in that way, we have this very deep study that is available to us. And although we've only recently had an actual archivist employed by the Kitchen, there was always someone on staff that sort of took it upon themselves to be the archivist. So we actually have almost every performance, talk, happening, anything that took place at the Kitchen is recorded, whether it was on, beta, film, etc. And the Getty has digitized many of it. And then from 2000s on, we have the original materials in New York.
which is rare for,
Yes.
for a performance institution to have such complete archives.
Right.
It's that period.
Right, and the fact that obviously the Getty is one of the most important and well-maintained archives in the country, if not the world. And so all this is to say is if you have a few hours to spare, you can actually watch the tapes, the recordings of, this is a still from the tapes that Namjoon Paik gave when he was conducting these panels and these lectures at the kitchen during the month of January 1984. They're quite funny, they're quite long. And a lot of the time he actually focuses on everything that went wrong, all the challenges, all the problems, all the things he would have changed leading up to the broadcast. So this was a moment for him to process his own sort of achievement in that way. And so the research that I will embark on, that you will embark on, that we'll do together will be sort of twofold insofar as looking into our own institutional archives to sort of retrace and actually mark this history so that it has its own clarity and we can speak to those that are still around that were involved inside of these this major program and kind of have this archaeology of this moment, but then also it will help inform how we work towards our collaborative program that will take place in the future. So I want to be mindful of time. We're a little after 7, but we're happy to answer any questions if anyone has them. Hi. Yes. I think that's Tina.
Hi.
It's very dark.
The fact that it's New York and Paris, that we're in dialogue with each other back then, and that now you're suggesting to revisit and recreate that dialogue, do you feel like the relationship between New York and Paris has changed since 1984? Have you thought about what it would mean for these cities to engage each other now in this moment versus back then?
I think it's less about the cities, and what I've thought about, what we've talked about so far is actually just these two institutions. But that's not necessarily that we're not going to be thinking of it. Something that we have already come across was Namjoon Paik's vision to actually expand this idea, and so it's something that we endeavor to continue insofar as you were saying today, you came across him saying something about he would have loved to include India, and many of you in the audience, I think, I know me and you, Tina, we all know that these sorts of broadcasts, these sorts of televisual experiments, they were not just happening in the West. They were happening all over the world right around the same time as individuals were, becoming more and more adept to evolving technologies. And so this is an ongoing interest of my own research and now both of our interests to sort of explore that. So that's not to say we won't think, we won't look into this idea of like how New York and Paris have changed, but I think it's more about what does it really mean to have a global moment. And even if this future project takes place in New York and Paris, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will only feature French and American artists. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you want to, the well-known McLuhan, global village was absolutely something that guided him in all of his work. And so I think that it's important to underscore that. And so we all know and see how the mass connectivity of media has completely gone haywire in many cases, and how it's, this was that great scene where they were talking about kind of the disintegration of the human connection through television, and I think we could apply that to social media also. So a question that, I've thought about at many points thinking about this is, what if we can harness the internet in a way where we can actually make a moment that brings everyone together, right, as opposed to the divisiveness that we're seeing every minute of every day.
Yeah, it's also, I think it really a lot of images from Paris, actually, even some from the streets. You see, I'm forgetting his name right now, but the fireworks artist who runs around with fireworks on his head, which of course today would not be possible for security reasons. And you can even also see this way to include the sort of popular street life of Paris, which really also dovetails into some Pompidou's history as this very strong infrastructural, for some violent gesture into the neighborhood of Les Halles, which had a century-long history of street performers, and some of that actually sort of makes it into Good Morning, Mr. Orwell. And I think today, with security concerns, with policing and so on, of course, the city of Paris itself has also evolved a lot.
So much has changed. I mean, I think that New York is not as much of a primary site in Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, because all of the New York aspects are from studio, right? Which I think is really interesting too, is that you really are getting a sense of, and we've talked about this, and again, this is nascent stages, but whatever we end up doing, we went back and forth, and does it make sense to sort of be in a public space? Does it make more sense to be, interior? And so these are all the things that we'll be kind of thinking about as we plan. But yes, I think it's safe to say that nothing could ever be made this way. Again, when I spoke to Christine Manache, who was the curator of Pompidou that worked with Andrew Paik before 1984, this all happened while the museum was open, which I still have such a hard time grasping, because there would never be approval for that today. And she very much said, oh, there's no problem, we just did it, which I think is why this is such a lovely, many examples of why it's such a great time capsule, but why whatever we end up doing will be obviously very, very different.
It also is a testimony of kind of aging avant-garde generation as well, of Mars Cunningham, of Cage, of boys who are, they're not in their most young experimental stages, but it's almost like it's also a document of that generation as well. Of course, with also the eclectic addition of these pop groups like Sapphire, the French pop singers.
Right, and Laurie Anderson, which is like, this is her contributions throughout. Are very representative of what she was doing at the time, which was very avant-garde, and how she was thinking about her art and how it was taking place both in performance and in video. So you're right, there are these moments where we have sort of the old guard and the new guard coming together in this work.
I must say that in this edit, I noticed that they cut most of Yves Montagn's tap dancing, which was a little bit sad, but in the French television version it went on for quite a long time.
Our hope, and we talked about this for this presentation, and we decided it would be much better to sort of have this as like an entry point into the project, but our hope is that we would be able to show both versions separately. Andrew Paik was known for going back and re-editing and always experimenting and playing, and so I don't think we can definitively say how many versions exist of Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, but we know, for example, the Kitchen Archive, EAI, we both have, oddly enough, in our archive, we only have Bonjour. We don't have Good Morning, Mr. Orwell. We have the French version in our archive. And Electronic Arts Intermix has this. Various institutions have both. So I think it would be really important for us to not only share our research, show some of these ephemeral materials, but also be able to present these works in their entirety. Any other questions? I think you have to press this.
Thanks for this lovely presentation and this super cool video I've seen before. Just getting back to this question about maybe the gap between Paris or installation through time, how you will deal with the way also we interact with technology and maybe the way institutions interact with technology within its own function regarding the this department called Création Industrielle, and they were like slightly separated from the museum program, mostly independent, and they were bringing technology as technology, not as art. So today, if you have an NFT or digital image, it would be considered and shown as art. At that time, it was like a big, the order was like more maybe present, or and of course Bernard Stiegler was there, who was the head of this department, so technology was also shaped on the way they were interacting by a philosopher that has been working mostly on technology and knowledge and politics.
So how do you see if you have to work or rework on that and maybe this stage or to reinvent this form? How do you deal with this? As you say, they were at that time a bit we believe that technology would save the world.
Right.
And so today where we are.
Where we know that maybe it's I think the history you just summarized is the case in a lot of major institutions. It's of course interesting. This wasn't the case with the kitchen. This is maybe where histories diverge a little bit, where sort of the mission of the kitchen, of course, was to have everything together all at once, and that technology was art, music was art, performance was art, poetry was art. This is all under one space. So I think it'll be interesting as we sort of explore those two different, ways of approaching our own organization's ideologies. But we were just talking about this yesterday. Again, we are so early in the planning process, but the fact that neither of us will be in our buildings, I think it will be a challenge, but I actually think this will help us really disconnect from what could be seen as or utilized as what you have in-house. I think those of us that have worked in institutions, it's always easier to do something within your space, right? You have your crew, you have your tech, you have everything there. We won't have this luxury, neither institution will. And so this will, I think, actually greatly inform what we end up producing. So I'm not answering your question because I don't have an answer for it, but these are some of the things we're thinking about, and I think that this actually is what will help us be more kind of flexible in the fact that we won't have the luxury of having everything in-house to mount for whatever it is that we produce.
So does that mean things will be more experimental, like back in the day?
I think that it leaves things open for more nimbleness, right? Whenever you produce something that's outside of a known space, there's always potential for having to shift and pivot. And I think that that's something that working in liveness is what we know, and that's something we have to deal with often. So I don't know if I'd say more experimental, but I think that it's definitely the project will be open to what may come from not having a set standard of conditions.
Yeah, I think just adding on that and relating to what you said, Jonathan, is I think beyond the more conceptual approaches to media, at least in the case in Pompidou, I think the battery is dying. It's speaking on you. I think it was also a question of actually having the people around, having the human resources as well, and a sense of permanence, also, which is true definitely for the performance partners. You would have sound specialists and light specialists who would be there all year round, and who would be able to. That's why I speak of this apparatus for performance as well, because it would also be like a tool to create and to implement these ideas. And like you said, they could intervene in very specific context, artistic or not so artistic, more related also to societal questions and so on. So I think that is also the question for moving from a state of permanence to more non-permanence and to more ephemeral. But like I said, I think these are really behind the questions that we're trying to raise right now in this stage. See what.
Thank you so much. I was curious. curious to know a little bit more about the context that you're imagining for the future commissions, experiments, because it's produced in a very particular moment of the year, right? The first day of the year, and I guess there's a certain history or heritage in television to produce special programs for either the New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. And I wondered if, as you mentioned, it was originally broadcasted. What was the context of those broadcasts? It was a national television channel, were there minor television channels in the US and in Paris or France respectively, and how does that translate to thinking about the internet or a computer or a laptop or a phone versus a medium of distribution like television, which was not necessarily to compare them democratically, but that there's more of a chance encounter with what is on television than what there is on a computer, for instance, or on a phone, and you need to know that something's happening to tune in into the broadcast versus just zapping through a channel and encountering the world that now would have on television.
Right. I should say that with whatever we end up doing will likely not necessarily be on New Year's Day. But you're right though. This does follow a model or a rubric, which was very much what Paik wanted to do. He wanted to essentially take this model of commercial television, push back on it, right, as a means of like this artistic takeover. So this idea of adapting what commercial television was doing at the time was of interest and was purposeful. Going back into that moment, to New Year's Day, the New York Public Broadcast System, WNET, was how it was broadcast in the United States, only in New York. So it was only if you were in New York were you able to see it. And I think that's why the kitchen was made an event of it, right? Because of course most people had TVs, maybe not everyone had TVs, and it became kind of an event. And so this is why they had a viewing party, if you will, for that. I guess it would be interesting. Do you know if there were spaces in Paris that did the same thing?
It was shown in Pompidou as well, but especially it was actually broadcast on France 3, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest.
Right, Channel 3,
yeah,
or
yeah.
right, yes.
And I think a viewing number was it 25
million viewers, because also it was broadcast, and I don't know the channel offhand, in Korea and also in Germany. So those were the 4 countries that had access to this broadcast. And again, we were, in some of our meetings we've talked about obviously the pandemic and how there was this like shift to programming, to performance that happened online. And I know all of us were very tired of that by 2021 and 2022, so we're hoping by the time this happens, it'll feel unique again. But actually taking some of those approaches and part of the research will be kind of to look into what worked, what didn't work. But I would say that we would treat it like any other program where we would obviously, we would know the location, we would know the site, we would know the place and the time and all of this, and that would obviously be communicated. And we would need to figure out what platform works best for the institutions, what makes most sense for accessibility, biggest reach, etc. And so actually that is having that recent history of 2020, 2021, and what some of our own institutions and